You ever feel like the air around you knows something you don't? Like the walls, the floor, even the creaking pipes are holding their breath, waiting for you to see it? It wasn't a particular night or a single argument that started it. It was a collection of invisible bruises, a shoulder turned away here, a hand pulled back there, a smile that flickered and died halfway through a conversation. But I wasn't looking for signs. I was too busy wearing myself thin trying to build something solid for both of us. Her name was Lauren. Sharp eyes. Quicker mouth. She had this habit of twisting her wedding ring when she was lying, a nervous tic she didn't even realize had betrayed her more times than I could count. I had noticed it early, maybe months before everything cracked open, but I shoved the thought down so deep it probably suffocated. The night it happened wasn't rainy or stormy or cinematic. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I got off work earlier than usual because the new manager at the auto shop turned out to be less of a tyrant than we feared. I swung by a little bakery Lauren liked and grabbed her favorite, cherry pie, the one thing that could fix even her worst days. Some stupid part of me thought she'd see it and remember who we were before everything got tangled. Her car was in the driveway when I pulled up. Lights on in the living room. Music playing low. For a second, I actually smiled. I thought maybe things were finally shifting back to us. When I walked in, the smell hit me first. Not food, not candles, cologne. Heavy, musky alien. I stood in the doorway, bag in my hand, pie getting colder by the second. Voices floated down the hallway laughing, low, the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than any scream. I didn't call out. I didn't stomp my feet or slam doors like a fool in a soap opera. I moved slowly, every step quieter than the last, as if the house itself might betray me with a creak. I followed the sounds past the living room, down the hall, to the guest room we never used. The door wasn't even closed all the way. Through the crack, I saw Lauren. Not just Lauren. Lauren straddling a man whose face I couldn't see, her hair falling in a curtain around them, her voice whispering things that, once heard, cannot be unheard. She said things to him she had never said to me, playful, dirty, light as air, heavy as stone. I didn't freeze. I didn't collapse. I felt a strange calm wash over me like someone had poured ice water straight into my bloodstream. I stepped back. Quietly. Left the pie on the floor like an offering no one would ever claim. Walked straight out the front door, no shoes, no jacket. I didn't even realize I was barefoot until I hit the gravel of the driveway and kept walking. No plan. No destination. Just away. I didn't answer her texts. Didn't listen to the voicemails that poured in later, her voice flipping between panic, anger, fake innocence, and desperate pleading in the span of hours. I emptied my bank account, grabbed what little cash I had, left my phone in the trash behind a gas station 2 towns over, and vanished. Gone. I wasn't running. I was erasing. I lived like a ghost for years. Different towns, different jobs, different names. I never stayed long enough for anyone to ask questions. I built a life out of scraps, out of quiet, out of anonymity. The only piece of me that stayed the same was the memory of her twisting that damn ring on her finger while she lied through her teeth. 18 years passed. Then last month a letter found me. No return address. Just my name, my real name, scrawled across the front like a punch to the gut. Inside, a photograph. A boy, maybe 17, with my eyes and her mouth, standing next to a headstone. The headstone bore my name. Beneath it, a note in trembling handwriting, he needs to know the truth. That was the first time in 18 years I allowed myself to wonder what I had truly left behind when I walked away. It wasn't just her. It was him. And now, the past I thought I'd buried was clawing its way back, demanding answers I wasn't sure I had the strength to give. The first reaction I had was to rip the letter apart. I stood there in the flickering light of the rented motel room, the photograph shaking in my hand, the note hanging between my fingers like it weighed 100 pounds. The urge to destroy it was overwhelming, as if shredding it could undo the past, could shove the truth back into the dark corner where I had left it to rot. But my hands wouldn't move. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, elbows on my knees, head down, trying to catch a breath that refused to come. The kid in the picture, he wasn't just a maybe. He was mine. There was no denying the shape of his jaw, the way his left eyebrow arched slightly higher than the right, the scar near his temple that mirrored one I got falling off a bike at 10. Lauren had lied about everything, but she hadn't erased me completely. She had made sure he grew up thinking I was a gravestone and a ghost. Hours later, after the sky had turned from black to a sickly gray, I was still staring at that damn photo when the motel phone rang. I hadn't heard a motel phone ring in years, and it made me jump like a shot had gone off. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. On the fourth ring, I picked it up, heart beating hard enough to hurt. Jason Carter? The voice was young, shaky, but determined in a way that wrapped around my spine and squeezed. Yeah, I said, the word rasping out like I hadn't spoken in years. Silence. A breath. Then, your son. I didn't remember hanging up, but somehow the receiver was back on the cradle and I was standing, shaking, every muscle in my body locked tight. There was no running now. He had found me. The next day, I stood outside a rusted diner at the edge of a forgotten town, the place we had agreed to meet. My reflection in the window looked worse than I felt. Hair too long, a beard starting to creep along my jaw, lines around my eyes that hadn't been there before Lauren burned my life down. A beat-up sedan pulled into the lot. He got out, tall, awkward, eyes scanning the lot like he was expecting me to bolt. He wore a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big, hands jammed deep into the pockets like he was holding himself together by force. When his eyes found mine, there was no anger there, just confusion, sadness, and something worse, hope. I could have walked away, pretended I was just another drifter with no ties to anyone. But I didn't. He walked toward me, hesitated, then stopped a few feet away. Tyler, he said. I nodded, swallowed hard. I know. Neither of us moved for a long moment. Then Tyler pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. A birth certificate. Father, Jason Carter. Mother, Lauren Parker Carter. No mystery. No doubt. I stared at my name printed there, feeling a strange hollow space open in my chest. I looked up to find Tyler watching me like he was trying to memorize every detail of my face. She told me you were dead, he said quietly. My whole life. She showed me your grave. My knees nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stay standing. Tyler needed me to stand. I owed him at least that much. Why now? I asked, voice rough. She's dying, he said simply. She wants to tell you something before she goes. She said she lied about a lot more than just you. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to disappear again before Lauren could reach out from her hospital bed and sink her claws into me one last time. But I didn't move, because Tyler was standing there, the living proof of everything Lauren had stolen, and I couldn't run from that. I don't care what she has to say, I said, but you deserve answers. Tyler's mouth twisted like he was holding back 100 questions at once. He nodded slowly. Come with me, he said. And without another word, we climbed into his car, the road unfolding in front of us like a scar that refused to heal. I didn't know what waited at the end of it. I didn't know how much of the truth I could survive. But I knew one thing. Lauren's lies weren't finished with me yet. They were just getting started. The drive to the hospital was brutal in its silence. Tyler gripped the wheel tight, his knuckles pale, but he didn't say a word. I watched the world blur past the window. Gas stations with broken signs, old diners with flickering neon, houses leaning sideways like they were too tired to stand straight anymore. All of it looked like the pieces of a life I could have had if things had gone differently. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, reality slammed into me harder than anything Lauren had ever thrown my way. This wasn't a phone call or a photograph or a whispered name anymore. This was flesh and blood. This was confrontation I couldn't dodge. Inside, the hospital smelled like bleach and fear. The elevator rattled as it crawled up to the 4th floor. Tyler stared straight ahead, shoulders locked, jaw tight. He hadn't spoken since we left the diner. He didn't have to. His silence screamed louder than any words. When the elevator doors opened, he finally turned to me. She's not, like you remember, he said, voice cracking slightly. I almost laughed at that. As if the Lauren I remembered had ever truly existed in the first place. We walked down a sterile hallway, past rooms full of quiet suffering. At the end of the hall, room 418, Tyler stopped. He hesitated with his hand on the door, looked back at me one last time, as if warning me there was still time to leave. I nodded once. He pushed the door open. There she was. Lauren lay in the bed, skin ashen, cheeks hollowed out, eyes sunken like someone had scooped the life out of her with a spoon. Tubes snaked from her arms. A machine beeped steadily at her side. But even broken down like this, she somehow still managed to radiate that same coiled smugness she always wore like armor. When she saw me, her mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Jason," she rasped, voice thin but unmistakably hers. "Took you long enough. Not I'm sorry. Not I missed you. Not even why did you leave. Just that." The same entitled Lauren, even now, even here. I didn't move closer. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed over my chest like a barrier. Tyler hovered in the doorway, uncertain. Lauren's eyes flicked to him, then back to me, and for the first time, I saw something that looked almost human flicker across her face. "You hate me," she said. I said nothing. "You should," she continued, coughing weakly. "I deserve it." Still, I stayed silent. She wasn't getting a performance out of me. Lauren shifted, grimacing in pain, and for a moment I thought maybe she wouldn't go through with whatever she had called me here to hear. But then she spoke again, softer now, deadlier. "I lied about you, about everything, about Tyler, about why you had to disappear." I tensed. Tyler took a step into the room, fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. Lauren laughed, a dry, broken sound that cut through the stale air. "You think you left because you caught me with someone else?" she said. "You think you vanished because you couldn't stand the betrayal?" Her eyes gleamed, almost feverishly. "You were supposed to disappear, Jason. You were never supposed to come back." I stared at her, blood pounding in my ears. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said finally, my voice low and dangerous. Lauren turned her head slowly, eyes darting toward Tyler. "You never realized," she whispered. "It wasn't about you. It was about him." Tyler stepped closer to the bed, face twisted in confusion and dread. "I didn't want him growing up with you," Lauren hissed. "I didn't want him to be anything like you." My stomach dropped through the floor. "You planned it," I said, barely able to get the words out. "You set it up." She nodded weakly. "I let you see. I let you walk in. I made sure you wouldn't fight. I made sure you'd leave and never come back." Tyler staggered back a step like she had punched him. "You used me," he said, voice shaking. Lauren didn't deny it. She closed her eyes and smiled, a small, sick smile that chilled me to the bone. "You were my ticket out," she whispered. "And he was my second chance." The machines beeped faster as her breath caught, her chest heaving. But I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. The weight of it all pinned me where I stood. She had orchestrated it. Every lie, every betrayal, every broken piece of my life, it had all been deliberate. Lauren's breathing grew more ragged. A nurse appeared at the door, alarmed, but I raised a hand to stop her. Tyler just stood there, frozen, watching the woman who had stolen his father from him and turned him into an unwitting pawn in her game. In her final moments, Lauren looked at me one last time. There was no apology in her eyes. No regret. Only a hollow satisfaction. And then she was gone. The machine screamed. The nurse rushed in. Tyler and I stood there, two strangers bound together by a lifetime of lies, staring at the empty shell of the woman who had burned our lives to the ground. For a long time, neither of us spoke. There were no words for what had just been torn open between us. There never would be. The hospital felt colder after Lauren died, like something essential had been sucked out of the air. Not warmth. She hadn't left that behind. Just the raw, crackling tension she had always carried with her. It was like standing in the wreckage after a bomb had gone off. The explosion was over, but the dust hadn't even started to settle. Tyler sat in one of the cheap vinyl chairs by the vending machines, his head in his hands. I stood a few feet away, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, trying to find something to anchor myself to. The silence between us was heavy, pulsing with everything we didn't know how to say. "I don't even know who I am anymore," Tyler said after a long while, voice low and broken. I didn't answer. What could I say? I didn't know who I was anymore either. I was a dead man in the eyes of the world, a memory warped by lies, a name on a gravestone no one had ever visited. Tyler finally looked up at me. His eyes were red but dry now, hardening into something tougher, something sharper. "She made me think you were a coward," he said. "She said you ran out on us, That you didn't want me. The words hit like fists, one after the other, bruising places inside me I didn't know could still hurt. I said, my voice rough. I know that now, he said quietly. Then, after a pause, but it doesn't change anything, does it? I shook my head. He leaned back in the chair, staring up at the ceiling like it might offer some answers. There's more, he said. I frowned. He dug into his backpack and pulled out an envelope, thick, battered, stained along the edges. He hesitated for a second before handing it to me. Found it last month, hidden under a loose floorboard in her closet. Everything. Letters, photos, stuff she never wanted me to see. I took the envelope like it was ticking in my hand, ready to blow. I didn't open it. Not yet. I could feel the weight of it, not just physical, emotional, crushing, final. I think you need to see it, Tyler said. Why didn't you tell me about this when you found me? I asked. He shrugged, a bitter edge to the gesture. Wasn't sure if I wanted to find you. Wasn't sure if you deserved it. Fair enough. I opened the envelope slowly, carefully. Inside were dozens of folded papers, faded photographs, and a small notebook with pages filled in Lauren's tight, meticulous handwriting. The first letter was dated the year after I disappeared. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to Tyler. It was addressed to someone named Paul. As I read, the world tilted sideways. Lauren hadn't just lied about the affair. She had built an entire second life out of it. Paul wasn't a fling. He was the man she planned everything with. They had set me up together, staged it, crafted the perfect scene for me to walk in on, just enough to shatter me, to push me to the edge so I would disappear without a fight, without custody battles, without questions. Lauren's letters detailed everything, how much she hated my small dreams, how she wanted a man who could give her more, how she had found freedom the day I walked away without looking back. Every word carved another piece out of me. Photos slipped from the pile, photos of Tyler as a baby, a toddler, growing up. But Paul was in some of them too. Holding him, smiling, acting like he was the real father. I squeezed the papers so hard they crumpled. All those years. I had thought I left because I wasn't enough. Because I had failed her. Because I had failed Tyler. But the truth was so much uglier. Lauren had engineered my disappearance. She had stolen Tyler's father from him and handed him over to a lie. I dropped the papers onto the cracked linoleum floor. Tyler stared at them without moving. You knew about him? I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. Only after she got sick, Tyler said. She started slipping, calling out his name in her sleep. I thought she was talking about you at first. But it wasn't you. He kicked at the leg of his chair. When I found the letters, it made sense. A long, aching silence fell between us. Finally, I said, what happened to Paul? Tyler's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. Dead, he said. Car crash. Years ago. She never talked about him after that. Just swallowed it all and pretended it never happened. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious. Maybe both. Everything Lauren had schemed for, everything she had torn apart to build her perfect life, had crumbled anyway. Karma, maybe, but it didn't fix what she had broken. Tyler stood up, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. You coming? He asked. Where? He shrugged. Figured you might want to see the house. Where I grew up. Where she kept all her lies stacked up like furniture. I hesitated. The idea of walking back into that world, the place Lauren had built without me, was enough to make my stomach churn. But Tyler was already walking away. And somewhere deep inside, I knew there were more truths buried there, truths I couldn't ignore if I ever wanted to claw back some piece of the life she had stolen. So I followed. The night swallowed us as we left the hospital behind, two broken pieces moving toward a house full of ghosts. Neither of us knew what we would find. But we knew one thing for sure, the lies weren't finished unraveling yet. Not even close. The drive to Lauren's house felt endless, even though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Tyler didn't play music. He didn't talk. We just sat there in the hollow space between two people trying to stitch something together from scraps that didn't fit. The town we entered looked like a place time forgot. Cracked sidewalks. Shuttered shops. Houses with peeling paint and sagging porches. This was the life she had traded everything for? This was the bright future she thought she was building with Paul? Tyler pulled up in front of a two-story colonial, old, tired, the front yard swallowed by weeds. The porch light flickered overhead like it wasn't sure it wanted to stay alive either. He killed the engine. We just sat there for a second, staring at it. You sure about this? I asked. Tyler let out a sharp breath that wasn't quite a laugh. No. But let's do it anyway. We got out. The front door wasn't locked. It swung open with a groan that sounded like the house itself was warning us to turn back. Inside, it smelled of dust and something sour, like memories left too long in the dark. The furniture was still there, threadbare couch, battered coffee table, pictures on the walls. Most of them were of Tyler. None of me. He watched me carefully as I stepped inside, like he wasn't sure if I'd bolt. I didn't. I walked through the house like it was a museum exhibit of someone else's life. In a way, it was. This wasn't the future Lauren and I had dreamed about when we were young. This was a twisted, hollow version she had stitched together after cutting me out like a bad scene. In the living room, Tyler stopped in front of a photo on the mantel. It was him as a baby, sitting on Paul's lap, smiling wide. They celebrated my first birthday without you, he said flatly. I had nothing to say. There was no version of the truth that could make up for that. He turned and led me down a narrow hallway to a door at the end. Her room, he said. I hesitated for a second before stepping in. It was like walking into a tomb. The bed was neatly made. The dresser cluttered with jewelry, makeup bottles, perfume, remnants of the woman who had spent her whole life spinning lies thick enough to choke on. On the nightstand was a box, plain, wooden, the lid slightly cracked. Tyler nodded at it. I think there's more in there. I crossed the room and opened it. Inside were more letters, more photographs. Some yellowed with age. Some newer. But tucked underneath everything was something I hadn't expected, a will. Handwritten. Dated 6 months ago. I unfolded it carefully, my hands suddenly clammy. The will left everything, the house, the accounts, the scraps of whatever life she had cobbled together, to Tyler. But there was a line at the bottom that caught my eye. A line scrawled in a shaking hand, to Jason Carter, I took your son, your life, your future. There is nothing left I can give you. I can only give you the truth. Beneath it, an address. Not this house. Another one. Tyler leaned over my shoulder to read it, frowning. I don't recognize it, he said. Neither do I admitted. But deep inside, a spark of something ugly started to burn. If Lauren had gone through the trouble of hiding something even after death, it wasn't going to be a family heirloom or some apology gift wrapped in a bow. It was going to be something worse. I folded the paper and stuffed it into my jacket pocket. We're going, I said. Tyler didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, jaw set like stone. We left the house behind without looking back. The road ahead was darker now. The address Lauren left behind was miles out of town, closer to the kind of places where the map runs out and the world stops pretending it makes sense. As we drove, 1,000 questions screamed in my head. What had she hidden? What could be so bad she hadn't dared show even Tyler? What final cruelty was she reaching out with from beyond the grave? The night grew colder. The stars overhead seemed too sharp, like knives pressing against the black sky. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, the truth waited. Rotting. Festering. Ready to tear the last pieces of us apart. The further we drove, the thinner the road became, as if the world itself was trying to shrug us off. The headlights carved out tunnels of light through the trees, but beyond them there was only blackness, heavy, pressing, endless. Tyler stayed silent beside me. The address burned a hole in my mind. Every mile we covered twisted the knot in my gut tighter. Whatever Lauren had hidden, it wasn't meant for peace. She hadn't left peace behind, just wreckage disguised as a treasure map. Finally, the GPS croaked out that we had arrived. We pulled up to a gate, old and rusted, sagging on its hinges. Beyond it, an overgrown path twisted up into the trees. No house in sight. No lights. No signs of life. This looks promising, Tyler muttered, voice dry with bitterness. We got out of the car. The air smelled like damp earth and old wood. Crickets buzzed somewhere out there in the dark, but otherwise, the night was silent, the kind of silence that feels thick enough to drown in. The gate screeched when Tyler shoved it open. We followed the path, flashlights cutting weak beams through the woods. Every step felt like sinking deeper into something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. And then, out of the trees, the house appeared. Calling it a house was generous. It was a shack, sagging and twisted, boards missing from the walls, the roof caved in at one corner. A place abandoned so long even the forest seemed reluctant to claim it. She owned this? Tyler asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. Apparently, I said. We approached cautiously. The front door was missing, hanging crookedly by one hinge. Inside, the place smelled of mold and rot. The floor groaned under our weight. We split up instinctively, Tyler taking the left side, me the right. The shack was empty. No furniture, no pictures. Just dust and broken memories. But in the far corner of what might have once been a living room, a trapdoor yawned open. Tyler spotted it first. Over here, he called. I joined him, shining my flashlight down into the darkness below. A set of rotting stairs led into a basement that looked more like a pit than a room. You thinking what I'm thinking? Tyler said grimly. That nothing good's down there? I said. He nodded. But we had come too far to stop now. We descended slowly, every step sending little clouds of dust into the air. The basement was small, just a cramped concrete square. Along the back wall, there was something that didn't belong, a metal locker, dented and rusted, padlocked shut. Tyler tried the handle. It rattled but held. I searched the room and found an old crowbar half buried in the dirt. I jammed it under the lock and leaned into it. With a shriek of protest, the lock snapped off and clattered to the floor. Tyler stepped back, tense, ready for anything. I opened the locker. Inside were two things. The first was a box, plain, wooden, much like the one in Lauren's bedroom. Inside it was a stack of documents, yellowed with age. I pulled them out carefully. Birth certificates, death certificates, adoption papers. But they weren't for Tyler. They were for another child. My heart punched against my ribs. There, in neat black ink, was the name Daniel Carter. Born 2 years before Tyler. Died 6 months after his birth. A child I never even knew existed. I staggered back, the world tilting. Tyler grabbed the documents, flipping through them, his face pale. She had another kid, he said. Disbelief cracking his voice. She had your kid. Before me. And she never told me. I said. The words tasting like ash in my mouth. My mind reeled. Lauren had lost a child. She had buried it so deep, hidden it so well, that I hadn't even known to mourn. And then, like some twisted coping mechanism, she had started over with Tyler, crafting a new life built on lies, pretending the first tragedy had never happened. And somehow, deep down, she had blamed me for it. I clutched the documents, hands trembling. There was something else in the locker, shoved against the back wall. A box of tapes. Old cassette tapes, each labeled in Lauren's sharp, angry handwriting. Dates. Times. Notes. Recordings. Tyler and I exchanged a look. No words needed. We grabbed the tapes and got out of that place as fast as we could, the old shack closing behind us like a mouth sealing shut. Back in the car, Tyler found an old cassette player buried under the seat, a relic of the junk Lauren had surrounded them with. He shoved the first tape in. The machine word clicked, and Lauren's voice filled the car. You think you know everything, Jason? Her voice hissed through the speakers, warped and grainy. But you don't. You never did. You never saw what you needed to see. You were never enough to save him. Tyler's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his face ghost pale in the dashboard light. The tape continued, Lauren's voice unraveling in snarling, half-coherent rants, full of rage and grief and blame. You should have known, she spat. You should have protected him. You should have stopped it. I sat there, paralyzed, as the truth sank in. She hadn't just hated me for leaving. She had hated me for surviving. In her twisted mind, Daniel's death had been my fault. Even though I hadn't even known he existed. Even though I hadn't been given a chance. Lauren had destroyed our life not just because she wanted more, but because she had been trying to punish me. Punish me forever. The tape clicked to an end. Silence filled the car. Tyler looked at me, eyes burning. What do we do now? He asked. I didn't know. But one thing was clear, Lauren might be dead, but her poison was still working its way through everything she left behind. And if we wanted any chance of surviving it, we were going to have to dig even deeper. Even if it destroyed us both, the sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon when we pulled into an empty parking lot at the edge of town. Tyler killed the engine and leaned back against the seat, his eyes closed, breathing through his teeth like he was trying to hold himself together by force. Neither of us had slept. Neither of us wanted to. The tapes sat in a pile between us, silent now, but their weight filled the car, pressing down like a lead blanket. Every second of silence felt louder than any scream. I ran my hand over my face, feeling the grit of exhaustion, of anger, of years of betrayal finally catching up to me. My mind kept looping the same sick realization. Lauren hadn't just lied, she had rewritten my entire existence, brick by brick, lie by lie. And Daniel was a ghost neither of us could outrun now. Tyler shifted, glancing over at me. "There's more," he said, voice low. I looked at him, waiting. "She kept a journal," he continued. "I found it once, years ago, but she caught me reading it and flipped out. Screaming, throwing things. Said it was private. Said it wasn't meant for me." He stared out the windshield, jaw tight. "I never touched it again. But it's still in the house. Hidden under the floorboards in her room." A pulse of adrenaline kicked through me. "If she wrote everything else down," I said, "then whatever we heard on the tapes, it's just the beginning." Tyler nodded grimly. "We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. We just turned the car around and drove back to the house Lauren had tried to turn into a coffin for the truth. The morning light made it look even worse. The porch sagging, the windows staring back at us like hollow, blind eyes. We pushed inside, the door groaning like it hated us for coming back. Tyler led the way upstairs. In Lauren's bedroom, he dropped to his knees beside the bed and pried up a loose floorboard with a crowbar. Dust and splinters exploded into the air, making us both cough. And there it was. A leather-bound journal, battered at the edges, the cover cracked with age. Tyler handed it to me like it was a grenade about to go off. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first few pages were ordinary: dates, appointments, idle musings about work, the weather, Tyler's grades. But as I flipped further in, the words darkened. The ink grew harder, almost carved into the page. December 14th. I hate him. I hate his stupid laugh, his stupid hope. Every day I look at him and all I see is failure. He couldn't even keep our son alive. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep reading. January 2nd. Paul understands. He knows what it's like to lose something and still have to pretend you're whole. Jason just patched over the hole and expected me to do the same. Pretend we were fine. Pretend Daniel didn't matter. February 8th. If Jason knew, if he ever found out about Paul and me, about what we're planning, he'd never leave willingly. He's too stubborn. Too stupid. He has to believe it was his choice. He has to break himself. Every word was a knife to the gut. She hadn't just stumbled into betrayal, she had crafted it like an artist. She had needed me broken, erased, so she could build the life she wanted without the weight of her guilt dragging behind her. And Paul, he wasn't just a mistake. He had been her co-conspirator, her partner in burning my life to the ground. Tyler sat beside me, reading over my shoulder, the muscles in his jaw flexing with every poisonous line. Then we hit a passage that froze us both. March 5th. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Sometimes I think about the day in the hospital when they told me Daniel was gone. How Jason wasn't there because I never called him. I never gave him the chance to say goodbye. Maybe if he had seen him, he would have fought harder. Maybe I wouldn't hate him so much now. The page blurred in front of me. I hadn't even known my son was dying. I hadn't been there to hold him, to tell him goodbye, because Lauren had stolen even that from me. She had sentenced me to grieve a child I never even knew existed. Tyler grabbed the journal and threw it across the room. His face twisted in fury and heartbreak. She was sick, he said hoarsely. She was sick in the head. Couldn't argue. I stood up slowly, crossing the room to where the journal had landed. I picked it up carefully, as if the thing might crumble into dust if I touched it too hard. And then I found the last entry. April 17th. If he ever comes back, if he ever finds out, I'll tell him the truth. Not because I owe it to him, not because he deserves it, but because the truth will kill him more thoroughly than anything else I could do. I closed the journal. Tyler stared at me, waiting for something, maybe for me to scream, to cry, to shatter into pieces the way Lauren had hoped. But I didn't. I felt something else rising up inside me instead. A cold, clear anger. Not wild, not out of control, but sharp, focused, unbreakable. Lauren had destroyed enough. She had stolen Daniel from me. She had stolen Tyler's childhood. She had tried to steal even my memory of myself. But she hadn't won. She was gone now. And Tyler was still here. And there were still pieces left worth fighting for. I met Tyler's eyes. "Let's burn it," I said. He blinked, startled. "Burn the journal?" he asked. I nodded. "Burn the journal. Burn the letters. Burn the past. All of it." He hesitated for a long moment. And then, slowly, he nodded. We gathered everything, the journal, the tapes, the letters, and carried them out to the backyard, where the dead grass whispered around our feet. Tyler doused the pile with lighter fluid. I struck a match and tossed it into the heart of it. The fire roared to life, greedy and bright. We stood there, side by side, watching it consume everything Lauren had left behind. The lies, the blame, the poison, gone. The flames crackled, and for the first time in years, I felt something break loose inside me. Something tight, something heavy. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't peace. But it was a start. Tyler turned to me, face lit by the firelight, and said, "What now?" I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing: whatever came next, we would face it together. No more lies. No more ghosts. Just the truth. And the long, hard road ahead. The fire died out just before sunrise, leaving behind a pile of twisted metal, charred paper, and ash that the wind slowly carried away. Tyler and I stood there for a while longer, as if waiting for some final signal that it was really over. It wasn't, of course. You don't erase 18 years of lies with a single fire. But you can burn the weight of them. When we finally moved, we didn't say much. There wasn't anything left to say about Lauren. She had gotten what she wanted: a clean exit, a final word, a legacy of damage. The question now was what to do with the pieces she hadn't managed to destroy. We got back into the car, both of us raw and hollowed out, and Tyler drove us into town. No destination. Just driving, letting the miles bleed into each other, letting silence fill the spaces where old pain lived. After a long while, Tyler pulled into the parking lot of an old diner, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. We sat in a booth by the window. Ordered coffee we barely touched. Tyler stared at his hands like he didn't recognize them anymore. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he said finally, voice cracking around the edges. Neither did I. All the rules he had grown up believing, about his family, his past, himself, had been ripped apart in less than 24 hours. I couldn't tell him how to rebuild from that. I hadn't even figured out how to do it myself. "You start small," I said eventually. "One thing at a time." He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot but clear. "Like what?" "Like deciding who you want to be," I said. "Not who she told you you were. Not who you think you have to be because of what happened. Who you actually want to be." It sounded too simple, too clean for the mess we were standing in. But it was the only honest answer I had. Tyler nodded slowly, as if tucking the words away somewhere deep, somewhere safe. After breakfast, if you could call 2 half-empty coffee cups and silence breakfast, we stopped by a cheap motel and got a room. 1 room, 2 beds. No fancy promises. No speeches about starting over. Just survival. That night, after Tyler passed out on the other bed, exhausted beyond his limits, I sat by the window, staring out at the highway. Watching the trucks roll by, taillights like blood-red smears against the dark. And I thought about Daniel. About the baby I never knew. The life that had been stolen from me without even the courtesy of grief. I thought about Lauren. About how much hate a person would have to carry to twist love into a weapon. And I thought about Tyler. The only thing left in the wreckage that was real. The only thing worth fighting for. I didn't sleep. Instead, I wrote him a letter. Not because I planned to leave, not this time, but because there were things I needed to say that I couldn't trust myself to say out loud without breaking apart. I told him about who I was before Lauren started cutting pieces out of me. About the things I had dreamed of for him even when I didn't know he existed. About the things I still dreamed of for him now. I told him he wasn't broken. That he didn't have to carry her choices as a weight around his neck. That blood wasn't destiny. That he could choose to be better. When I finished, the sun was creeping back over the horizon, washing everything in pale gold. I folded the letter and tucked it under his pillow. The next morning, Tyler found it. He didn't say anything. He just clutched it tight in his hand like a lifeline. We packed up, got in the car. No destination this time either. Just forward. Somewhere along the stretch of highway, Tyler said, there's a school a couple of towns over. Auto mechanic program. Cheap. Good rep, I was thinking. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Sounds good, I said. And for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't grief. Wasn't rage. Wasn't hollow. Hope. Small. Unsteady. But alive. We drove on, leaving the ashes of Lauren's empire behind us, the future unwritten and uncertain and wide open. And for the first time in 18 years, it was ours. Not hers. Ours. The next few weeks weren't a straight line. Healing never is. It wasn't like we burned Lauren's lies and magically became whole. No. The damage stayed. It stitched itself into the way Tyler tensed up when someone raised their voice. It hid in the way I second-guessed every word out of my mouth around him, terrified I'd accidentally step in the same traps Lauren had set all his life. We found a tiny apartment 2 towns over, a 3rd-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The walls were stained, the ceiling leaked when it rained, but it was ours. It smelled like paint and dust and hope. Tyler enrolled in the mechanic program he'd mentioned. I found a job at a local garage, long hours, busted knuckles, honest work. Work that didn't leave room for ghosts to sneak in and rot the edges of my mind. The first few nights in the new place were the hardest. Tyler barely spoke. I barely slept. We coexisted in parallel silences, both of us carrying too many invisible injuries, too many questions neither of us knew how to ask yet. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, I heard him in the living room long after midnight, just sitting there in the dark, the glow of his phone screen flickering against the walls. I didn't say anything. Didn't want to spook him. But after a while, he spoke, voice hoarse and raw. Sometimes I feel like I'm still waiting for her to call. To tell me this was all a dream. That none of this happened. That you're not real. I sat down across from him, the floor cold under my legs. I'm real, I said. He nodded, not looking up from his phone. Yeah. I'm just not used to it yet. Neither was I. A long pause stretched between us. Then, almost in a whisper, Tyler said, "Do you think she ever loved me?" The question cut deeper than anything Lauren had ever done. I didn't lie. He deserved better than that. I think she loved you the only way she knew how, I said. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't the right way. And it damn sure wasn't the way you deserved. He finally looked up at me then, eyes glassy. I don't want to be like her, he said. You won't be, I said. You're already not. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to believe me, like he was trying to stitch a future out of the tattered scraps we had left. Slowly he nodded, and something shifted between us. It wasn't easy after that. It wasn't perfect. Some days Tyler was sullen, snapping over nothing, slamming doors, retreating into long silences that made me feel like I was losing him all over again. Some days I was too sharp, too distant, walls built out of old survival instincts I didn't know how to tear down yet. But we kept trying. Small things at first. I taught him how to rebuild a carburetor. He showed me how to set up apps on a cheap secondhand phone. We bought groceries together, arguing over cereal brands like it actually mattered. Life, in tiny pieces, started to stitch itself back together. Not because Lauren's ghost was gone, but because we chose to build something she couldn't touch. One day, after class, Tyler brought home an assignment. An essay about someone who had changed his life. He left it out on the kitchen counter, maybe by accident, maybe not. I found it while cleaning up dinner. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. But when I read it, something inside me cracked open in a way I didn't know was possible anymore. He didn't write about Lauren. He didn't write about Paul. He wrote about me. He wrote about a man who came back from the dead to fight for him. A man who didn't run even when every scar screamed at him to. A man who stayed. I sat down hard in the rickety kitchen chair, the paper trembling in my hands. I didn't deserve it. Not really. Not after all the years he spent believing he was abandoned. But he gave it to me anyway. That night, as we sat on the cracked old couch eating terrible frozen pizza, I looked over at him, my son, my blood, my second chance, and I said the words I hadn't let myself say yet. I'm proud of you. He froze a slice of pizza halfway to his mouth. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not Lauren's smile. His own. Something real. Something that belonged to him. And for the first time in 2 decades, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's life. I felt alive. For him. For me. For both of us. The past was a minefield we'd never fully escape. Some scars would never heal clean. But we were building something stronger than the wreckage. And Lauren's lies, her twisted legacy, would rot in the ashes where they belonged. Not in us. Never again. Spring came late that year. It crept in slow, hesitant, as if it wasn't sure it was welcome after everything the winter had buried. The trees stayed bare longer than they should have. The air stayed sharp. But underneath it, life was pushing through, stubborn, rough, unstoppable. Just like us. Tyler finished his first semester with grades better than either of us had dared hope for. He started working part-time at a mechanics shop, the same kind of place where I'd spent most of my life breaking my back just to keep moving. He wasn't just good at it. He was brilliant. Better than me, if I'm being honest. He had this patience, this precision, this instinct that couldn't be taught. Watching him work, seeing the way he found order in the chaos of broken machines, it was like seeing a version of the future neither of us had dared to believe in. A future he built with his own hands. Not the one Lauren tried to trap him in. We still fought sometimes. Sharp, ugly arguments that left both of us raw and breathing hard. Old wounds bleeding into new ones. But we always came back from it. Always found a way to sit back down, look each other in the eye, and keep going. We promised we wouldn't run. Neither of us ever said Lauren's name anymore. We didn't need to. She had shaped our past, sure. But she had no say in our future. One night, a warm one for once, Tyler and I sat out on the fire escape outside our apartment, watching the streetlights flicker, listening to the hum of distant traffic. He leaned back against the metal railing, a can of soda sweating in his hand. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left? He asked suddenly, voice casual but brittle underneath. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Yeah, I said. All the time. And I stared out over the rooftops, the old guilt curling in my chest. Quieter now, but still there. I think we both would have been a lot more broken than we are now, I said finally. She would have eaten us alive. Piece by piece. Tyler nodded slowly. I used to wish you'd stayed, he said. Even when I hated you. Even when I thought you abandoned me. I waited. But now, I'm glad you left, he said. I'm glad you got out. Even if it hurt. Even if it meant I had to find you later. Because now I know what it means to choose. He looked at me, his eyes steady, burning with something fierce and clean. You chose to come back. The words lodged in my throat. I couldn't answer. Not with words. I just reached over and gripped the back of his neck, pulling him into a rough, awkward hug that neither of us knew how to do right. And for the first time in a lifetime, I felt the past loosen its hold. Not vanish, not forgive, but loosen. Enough to breathe. Enough to build. The next morning, I drove him to work, the radio humming some half-forgotten song from 20 years ago. He hopped out at the shop, backpack slung over one shoulder, flashing me a grin that was all his. A grin Lauren could never touch. As he disappeared into the building, I sat there for a minute, engine idling, heart full. I had lost so much, been stolen from, lied to, destroyed. But somehow, against every odd, every betrayal, every nightmare, I had been given this second chance. Not to erase the past, but to prove it didn't own us anymore. I pulled out onto the road, the town slipping past me in the mirror. Not running, not vanishing, driving forward, where the future was messy, uncertain, unfinished, but ours. And that was enough. It was everything.